We begin tonight with the latest developments in the New York City shooting that left 4 people dead, including an NYPD officer. The city's deadliest shooting in 25 years. Good evening, everyone. I'm Hena Doba in for Elizabeth Vargas. Police have ID'd that gunman as 27-year-old Shane Devin Tamura. Now, according to the NYPD, he has a history of mental illness and drove from Las Vegas to New York City to carry out his attack. It's still unclear why he decided to go on a deadly rampage that ended with him turning his gun on himself. The shooter played high school football in Southern California. He left behind a suicide note claiming he had CTE, that is a brain disease linked to head injuries. He even requested for his brain to be studied after his death. Mayor Eric Adams says the gunman blamed and targeted the NFL.
The note was found on the suspect that he stated he had CTE, a brain injury known for those who played contact sport of some nature, and he seemed to have blamed the NFL. The NFL headquarters was located in the building, and he mistakenly went up the wrong elevator bank.
Security cameras caught the gunman yesterday as he stepped out of a black BMW. He casually strolled into that high-rise building, strapped with an AR-15 style rifle. He then went inside, where he shot and killed that police officer and 2 other people in the lobby before heading to the elevator. A woman stepped off. He chillingly allowed her to walk away. He then went to the 33rd floor, home of Rudin Management, where he shot and killed another person before shooting himself in the chest.
He shot himself and took his own life, shot himself in the chest of what appears to have been that he wanted to preserve his brain for a reason of research.
The Office of New York City's chief medical examiner said today that it will examine the gunman's brain as part of the autopsy. The New York City Police Commissioner also says they are questioning an associate of the gunman who helped him get that rifle.
The weapon used, an AR-15 style assault rifle, was assembled by Mr. Tamura using a lower receiver purchased by an associate. We have located that associate and others, and will be questioning him about that purchase.
Still so many unanswered questions tonight. I want to bring in Kaz Daughtry, New York City's Deputy Mayor for Public Safety. Deputy Mayor, thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
You and I were talking during commercial. It has been a busy few hours. What else have we learned about the suspect?
Well, like you know, I think the commissioner stated that they have located an individual that has purchased the receiver portion, which is the lower portion of the weapon. It appears to be either a friend or a coworker. And that person is going to be spoken to by the investigators and lastly the NYPD detectives. And also, as they heard the mayor earlier today say that the mayor and the commissioner sent detectives down to Las Vegas to assist with the search warrant and actually interviews. So that's where we're at right now.
The mayor said the suspect was trying to target the NFL. He did not make it to that floor. But is there a definitive motive as of now?
Right now, this is what it appears to be. That's where the investigation is kind of leading it. And remember, this is still early. This only happened a couple of hours ago. So this is still in its infancy stages.
Of course.
And it seems like he had got up to the wrong bank of elevators to get up to the NFL headquarters. And as you mentioned earlier, that the individual did have, he left behind 3-page note. And on the note, it had some referred to CTE, which is, as you know, which is associated with the NFL injuries to the brain.
Did you see that letter? Do we know what else it contained?
And that is I did see the letter, and that's part of the investigation. Not going to go into specific in the letter, but it referenced a lot of CTE facts to it.
I have to ask you about the NYPD officer who lost his life. I understand you were at the hospital. You met with the family. His wife is 8 months pregnant. He leaves behind 2 younger children. You were also there when his father learned the news of his son dying. Tell me what you saw, what you heard.
Just gut-wrenching, heart-wrenching. When the mayor, myself, and the police commissioner who went to visit the dad and his family is inside there was a room in the hospital for the family. And just to see the pain on that father's face, and he was speaking in his native language, and there was a translator, and he was telling the mayor that he's my only son, that they're expecting a baby in a couple of months, and he was screaming that he's my only child, he's my only son, and then they were trying to calm him down. He was having a heart pain, and the doctors came in to rush. They rushed in and they put him in a wheelchair, and they took him away. And as they were taking him away, he looked at the mayor and the room. And he said that this is what he loved to do. He loved to do this, and this officer's a hero.
Yeah.
Prime example of came here, migrated to this country, did everything right, and wanted to serve the city, and he did it admirably.
And we're also hearing that his wife, Officer Islam's wife, may be having complications with the pregnancy now.
Yeah, I heard something like that. Obviously, she was concerned, and she has, she is pregnant. From what I was told, that everything seems to be okay with the baby and her right now. But
So
we've
happy
got
to
to
hear
keep her
that.
calm. But it's hard to do in this difficult situation.
He is a hero. I want to go back to that woman who walked off the elevator when the suspect was getting on, and he simply allowed her to walk away. Do we know anything more? She's a witness. Was she interviewed? What did she see?
Yeah, the detective bureau they have spoken with her. I'm not going to go into the logistics of the details of the investigation. However, maybe it was an angel, an act of God. I'm not sure, but we are very grateful. We don't know what was inside of the suspect's head, allowing her to leave, but we're happy that he did.
Where does this investigation go next, Deputy Mayor?
This is still in its infancy stages. You've got to remember, you got the NYPD, you got the Las Vegas Police Department, you have our federal partners as well. This is still ongoing, and we're just gonna, wherever the investigation takes the officers, the detectives, that's where it's going to go.
Deputy Mayor, your time is so appreciated tonight. I know it's been a tough few hours, not just for you, but for this city. Thank you so much, Cass Daughtry.
Thank you for having me on.
Of course.
Thank you.
And joining me now is Dr. Chris Nowinski. He is a former pro wrestler and college football player. He is now a neuroscientist and the CEO of the Concussion Legacy Foundation. Chris, welcome to the show. I'm sorry it's under these circumstances, but we're hoping you can provide some insight on what potentially the motive could have been. So we're following unconfirmed reports that the suspect had a 3-page letter, which I just confirmed with the deputy mayor, where he thanked a few doctors, a few professionals, including you, who were part of a PBS documentary about CTE. When you found that out in the last few hours, what was your reaction?
Well, I'm just heartbroken for all the victims of this and their families. I mean, this was just tough to watch the beginning of the show. It's hard to know what to make of it. With somebody who's willing to perform an act like this, I mean, they're clearly not in their right mind. So it's also unfortunate to consider that this sort of thing has happened before. So when I began this work 20 years ago, it was my colleague, Chris Benoit at the WWE, who confided in me his concussion concerns. We didn't get help, and then killed his wife and son and himself. And so I've always known this is a life and death issue. We don't know if this individual has CTE, but big picture, this is CTE and traumatic brain injury are very complicated and devastating issues.
And I know it is complicated. Can you try to explain to me briefly as you can, what is CTE for our viewers that may not be as familiar?
Sure. CTE is a degenerative brain disease that's caused by repeated traumatic brain injuries. It starts as small lesions in the frontal lobe and spreads throughout the brain over time, even after you stop getting hit in the head. In the end stages, it causes dementia. In younger people who have been diagnosed with CTE, many have had mental health problems.
During the press conference yesterday, police said the suspect shot himself in the chest, which is of note since he might have been trying to preserve his brain so scientists, doctors can look at it. CTE can only be diagnosed after death with an autopsy. But I was reading your notes, and you mentioned even after the autopsy, we won't know if CTE was the exact cause. Can you elaborate that?
Yeah, you can't tie any brain injury or brain disease or medical condition to a single act, a single behavior. So whatever the medical examiner discovers, it's not going to answer all the questions. It might give us a window into how impaired his brain was. So for example, when I think of Aaron Hernandez, who murdered 2 people and had stage 3 CT at the age of 27, when we first got the brain, I thought it would be small lesions and it wouldn't answer anything. But having stage 3 that advanced at that age, that would absolutely change anybody's personality, their judgment, their behavior. So it'll be, I will wait to see what the findings are and continue to try to educate people that the fact is this fall, almost 2 million young people will be playing football and take 1 billion combined head impacts. And we should not be surprised that some will go on to develop behaviors associated with damage to their frontal lobe and other parts of their brain.
I think it's important you mention that because it's not just professional players that can suffer from CTE. Would that be correct?
Yes, and we published a study a couple of years ago looking at 45 former high school players who all died in their teens or 20s, and 31% had the disease. So it is entirely possible that he had the disease, and then predicting that has a lot to do with when he started playing, because your odds of developing CT go up about 15 to 30% per year you play.
So even if the suspect didn't specifically have CTE, he could still have had some kind of brain damage, correct? Not all traumatic brain injuries from playing football are considered CTE.
Correct. There's 15 other types of pathologies associated with traumatic brain injuries and repetitive traumatic brain injuries. An example is Robert Card, who killed 17 in Maine, the veteran who was a grenade instructor. He didn't have CT, but he did have widespread white matter changes to his frontal lobe that we suspect would lead to behavioral changes and impulsive decision and irrational thoughts.
You mentioned Aaron Hernandez, Andre Waters, another football player. They turned to violence, ultimately suicide. Is this an unfortunate common trait in people with CTE?
Luckily, it's not common. So this is a very rare outcome, but it is an outcome we've seen before. Another example would be Philip Adams, age 32, killed 6 strangers in 2021 in South Carolina. He already had stage 2 CT with frontal lobe atrophy. So again, it's something that we've been seeing. We do need to get these people help. I was just contacted by recently retired NFL player worried about a teammate who was showing these signs and recently got a gun. Like, this is a daily battle to protect these people from themselves and then protect others.
Chris Nowinski, really appreciate your insight tonight. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you.
And while investigators piece together a motive, the city is mourning the death of those 4 people needlessly killed in this shooting. A prayer vigil is set to begin in less than an hour in Manhattan's Bryant Park. Among the victims, 36-year-old officer Didarul Islam. Just hours ago, officers stood shoulder to shoulder for the dignified transfer of Islam's body to a mosque in the Bronx. He was an immigrant from Bangladesh. He was the father of 2 young boys. His wife is 8 months pregnant with their 3rd child. He was the first to die yesterday, but his memory will live on as a hero who put himself in harm's way to protect others. I want to bring in retired NYPD Lieutenant Commander Joe Cardinale. Thanks for coming on the show, sir. This was developing while you and I were on the air yesterday. I want to thank you for your time yesterday and, of course, today. This is such a tragedy. I can't imagine the grief these families are going through. Can you tell me just how fellow officers deal with this kind of tragedy when they hear the news that one of their own has been killed?
Well, there's a lot of help for the officers. They do have internal help within the department. The chaplains get involved. The religious leaders get involved, and it's very important because it's hard to grasp this. I mean, I've been to so many police officers' funerals, over the years, and it's sorry to say, but they never do get easy. All right, they never do get easy. And what happens here, Hena, is these families receive a life sentence. All right, that's what they receive. I can speak most certainly for Harry Ryman, my father's friend, who was killed in 1980 in Brooklyn when he was off duty. He had a family of 5, and that family went through hell over the years for every time somebody came up for parole and everything else. But it's a constant reminder for every family every time something like this happens. You have the Widows and Children's Foundation that the PVA runs. You have Survivors of the Shield. And that's where they all rely on each other. They all speak to each other. They get help for each other. And the NYPD provides a family for those families. It's an extended family that never leaves them from this point on.
You mentioned it's a life sentence for these families. I was speaking to the deputy mayor who said he heard Officer Islam's father, scream when he heard about his son's death, possibly suffering from a stroke. When you hear those details, how much harder does something like this become?
It compounds it because it's, the insanity that goes on with these cases, and many other police officers that were killed in the line of duty, and the families have to live with this. And when the funeral is over, when everything and everybody's gone, and the pomp and circumstance is gone, these families have to live with it every day, every single day. And they get they do have help available. But imagine being home, being that widow, expecting a child. Another month from now, that child will be born without a father. Those two other young sons without a father. This woman has to deal with the fact that she has to raise them right now and explain to them what happened to their father. And I think people should really grasp what happens when an officer loses his or her life in the line of duty. It takes its toll on the community, it takes its toll on the city, it takes its toll on the families and all the members of the NYPD.
We were showing pictures from that dignified transfer. There it is again. There's images of officers standing shoulder to shoulder as they honor their colleague. It's striking. How does something like this impact morale?
Morale, it eats away at the morale, especially in a city like New York. And, now's not the time to discuss things, but with the pressure that these cops are under right now, with the way things are going in the city, with the politics that are involved with this city right now, cops are thrown to the side. They've dismantled this police department to degrees that, I've never seen any department go through. And yet every day they go to work, they put that uniform on, they wear that badge, and they do the best they can under the worst circumstances. So when something like this happens, it's just another way to knock somebody down, knock the morale down. But you know what? This is the NYPD. They get up, they're resilient, they'll go to work tomorrow, they'll never forget. They will never forget these incidents. You can never forget them. All right. And they continue. And that's what people have to understand. This is a calling. It's not a job. It's a calling. And people need to realize that cops are human. They bleed, they hurt, they cry, they laugh. They're not robots. All right. And they deserve all the respect and all the support. And hopefully moving forward, we could start getting that respect back into the NYPD, because this great group of guys and gals, they deserve it.
Commander, speaking of moving forward, how will the shooting impact security in the city? Will NYPD have to step up security after these recent events?
I think the private sector is going to have to step up the security as well. I mean, you and I went over this yesterday about the open plaza, how he walked across. I mean, people say, how does he walk across and nobody sees him? I mean, Hena, you walk in New York City. People walk with their heads down. They're on their cell phones. They're listening to things. Right. And they just keep walking. So it's very, we saw that. He walked in there unchallenged. So buildings like this, could they improve the security? There's always room for improvement. So people will learn from this. Buildings will learn. The managers of the buildings, all the private corporations will get together with the NYPD, put more eyes in the sky with all the cameras and everything. But the thing is, you have to make them harder targets. You cannot have soft targets, just like the schools. You must make them hard targets.
Like I mentioned, you and I were live on TV yesterday as the story was unfolding. Details were trickling in. You and I were learning them as we were going. Now that we have a better picture of what happened, is there anything that surprised you, and what happens next in this investigation?
I mean, the whole thing surprised me how he was able to, he planned this. And what surprised me was that trip, that 36 hours, 2,500 miles in 36 hours by yourself. We don't know if he was by himself. They still have to nail that down. But it's a good shot that he was by himself for this trip, and his adrenaline's pumping, keeping him awake, and he's planning this for the 36 hours. This is what I'm going to do. I'd like to know if he had prior knowledge of that building, or how he did get knowledge of it, that he knew that he had to go in. In answer to a question you asked earlier about that woman that just got out by the grace of God, I think that her coming out of that elevator helped him out, because maybe he knew he needed to get into that elevator, and maybe he didn't know that certain floors needed a pass key. All right, maybe he did not know that, but he planned this, and he knew exactly what he was going to do when he went in there. And I really, I heard a former Navy SEAL explain that when people get in this mindset, this is what they do. They look straight ahead. He walked in there confident. He knew what he had to do, and he knew the outcome of this. That's why he left everything the way he did. He knew the outcome of this.
Joe, your experience is invaluable. I want to thank you again for yesterday and coming back on today. Joe Cardinale, thank you again, sir.
Well, thank you, Hena, for covering this.
Coming up on the other side, it's something nobody wants to think about, even talk about. But what exactly would you do if you found yourself in an active shooter situation like we saw yesterday? How you react could save your life. Former Navy SEAL Jonathan Gilliam will join us on that next. And in other news, President Trump just landed back in the United States from his trip to Scotland. There he is. He's on his way back to the White House. We'll have more on his trip straight ahead. Back to that horrific attack in New York City. This harrowing image shows office workers inside that Manhattan skyscraper. Do you see that? They must have been terrified. They're barricading doors with office furniture, including sofas, desks, chairs, anything they could get their hands on. And that's as the shooter roamed around outside. It makes you think, how would you respond if something similar were to happen in your workplace, or while you're at a grocery store or in a nightclub? We've seen this time and time again in our country. It's something nobody wants to imagine happening to them, but shootings in the United States are sadly a fact of life. And how you react in that situation could mean the difference between life and death. Someone who has been thinking a lot about this, Jonathan Gilliam. He was both a Navy SEAL and an FBI special agent. He's written a book called Sheep No More, which is essentially a guide on how to survive active shooter situations, home invasions, terror attacks. Jonathan, welcome to the show. And as I name these, we've all seen it in this country, so I appreciate your time. You've written a whole book on how to be prepared when the least expected happens. Could people really be prepared for a situation like what we saw play out yesterday?
Well, I think they could, because, you know, the interesting thing is that an attacker has to learn about the environment that they're going to attack. And so who better to know about that environment than you yourself, the environment that you're in on a daily basis, or if you're visiting somewhere like an arena, for instance, to go see a special event, you yourself, you can do the same assessment of that venue or your home or your office that an attacker, a terrorist, or anybody else, whether they're going to use a knife or a gun, you determine what is the most likely type of attack, where it would happen, when that would happen, and who would carry it out, and what avenue of approach that they would take. And so I try to tell people, you know, my career goes from attacker to defender. And then I targeted those attackers with that knowledge. And we all have that switch that we can go back and forth if we know how to look at it. But the most important thing to do, though, out of all of this, is to consider this before it happens. Because if you wait until it's occurring, that is too late to prepare or try to get that mindset.
That is a sad reality. We just showed our viewers the image of workers barricading the door to their office. Is that what you would have done in the situation?
Most likely, I mean, if that's all they have, if they can't escape out of that area, then that is at least effort. And I don't know if they thought about this before, but they put a lot in front of that area where that person could come in, and at least that would give them time to move to another location, because we got to think about these three things. I think they're always using the wrong term when they say run, hide, or fight. I believe it's escape, evade, or fight. So if you think about that, you should always try to escape if you can, and if you can't, then you try to evade. Find cover or concealment, but continue to try to move yourself away from that area. But if you have to fight, then you fight. And you can't do any of that if you're so scared that you can't move. If you haven't thought about these things and considered them, especially from the attacker's point of view, you're going to have a very difficult time trying to figure out what to do in that circumstance. So whoever did that, whoever put that out, they put a lot of effort very quickly. They knew something was happening, and that is better than nothing. That is better than hiding underneath a table, for instance.
Jonathan, what if it was a smaller location, like a church or a grocery store, where escape is a lot less likely?
Mm-hmm. Well, okay, this is where, again, I go back and forth on this, is that you have to prepare yourself before this. All these churches, for example, that have been attacked recently, schools, for instance, is the same thing. If you are considering what could occur, there are only a few ways into a church. And so if you consider those things and you have people there looking, and not just looking for somebody walking up with a gun, but looking for things, for avenues of approach, for potential types of attacks that could occur, you will be able to look in the direction that you yourself would approach. And this is very easy to do because it's not rocket science. That's why these people are criminals and they're attackers, because they couldn't go and do something more successful that actually takes real constructive thinking and learning. So you yourself, you can do this and look at that. And if you have these plans of action, then people will know where to go and what to do. Again, with a church or a smaller venue, if you have people looking out for that and you have a plan on which way people are going to go, and that if they hear something, they will go quickly, they'll be much more likely to live. I'll give you one quick example. My company does threat assessments for entertainment venues. So we were on tours and we go around, and every venue we go to, we do a threat assessment. And when I brief the venues, I tell them there are no fireworks in this show. So if you hear something that sounds like fireworks, assume it's a gun, because it is not part of our tour. Just that awareness could change everything. In the case of Las Vegas, where that shooting occurred, that could have saved countless lives if people would have realized it's not fireworks.
Jonathan, I'm running out of time, but I want to ask, what's one simple change we can make in our daily lives that can improve our chances of surviving an attack?
I would think looking at your surroundings and realizing that there are specific times and places that these could occur, and that if you're aware of those things, awareness is the key. There is no greater technology or tool than an aware human to stop an attacker, and that's how you do it. That's how you survive in these circumstances.
Jonathan Gilliam, like I said, this is a sad reality. It's a conversation we need to have in our country. Thank you again for coming on.
You got it.
Coming up, the fight to secure the border moves inland. South Dakota is calling it Operation Prairie Thunder, with helicopters, Highway Patrol, National Guard, all teaming up with ICE to boost deportations. We've got the details for you next. Don't go anywhere. Turning now to the administration's crackdown on illegal immigrants and the focus on catching the, quote, worst of the worst. That is, migrants with a criminal past, beyond just crossing the border illegally. The Department of Homeland Security is touting new numbers, saying 70% of recent ICE arrests have been of illegal immigrants who've either been convicted of crimes already or are facing criminal charges. And it's not just federal agents at our southern border districts that are making these arrests. State officials further north are also ramping up efforts to track down criminals and support ICE deportation efforts. NewsNation's Jorge Ventura joining us with more on this operation in South Dakota, showing success that other states are eager to emulate. Hey, Jorge, what can you tell us?
Hey there, Hena. Well, earlier this year, we saw the state of Florida carry out these similar operations. Now we're seeing the state of South Dakota jumping on board and is set to carry out its largest crackdown on crime and illegal immigration. This is now dubbed Operation Prairie Thunder. Now we are learning that for the next 5 months, up to 15 state troopers will hit the streets each month in patrols targeting drug sales, gang activity, and parole violators in the metro area. The operation will also take to the skies with Lakota helicopters and a highway patrol airplane aiding in drug interdiction and traffic enforcement. Also in a rare move, 6 National Guard soldiers have been activated to assist ICE directly with processing and administrative work tied directly to deportation. Here is the governor on this latest operation.
ICE has asked for help in this area, and South Dakota is stepping up and stepping in to meet this need. Our soldiers will use their expertise to learn these processes and help keep those 2 offices running efficiently so deportations can happen quicker. ICE agents can spend more time on the streets arresting bad guys.
Now, beyond patrols and air support, the state is ramping up efforts to remove undocumented criminals already in the system. A special team is now targeting fugitives and parole violators, some who may be flagged for deportation under a 287G agreement. The governor formally requested just last week. So far, the state has flagged at least 10 undocumented inmates for possible parole to ICE, mostly nonviolent offenders near the end of their sentences. ICE, meanwhile, has made at least 262 arrests in South Dakota with only 7 federal officers. Hena.
All right, tell me more about this 287G agreement. How common is it? Are more states jumping on board with ICE?
So this has been a very important initiative from the Trump administration when it comes to carrying out its deportation operation. They are urging local law enforcement across the nation to sign up for what's being called a 287G agreement. Now, this agreement does give local law enforcement some powers and authorities to assist when it comes to not only immigration duties, but raids. For example, if they stop an illegal immigrant during a DUI stop, they could directly now refer that individual to ICE. And right now, what you're looking at is a map that's just showing how widespread those partnerships are starting to become, especially in those Republican states like Texas, Florida, and Georgia. But we're also seeing North Carolina seeing an uptick in those 287G agreements. Arkansas, Louisiana, and now South Dakota are also signing up, those interior states. So we're now seeing that growing trend beyond the southern border. And earlier this year, Hena, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis did say that he wants his state to lead in the most 287G agreements. He says that he wants Florida to be the role model on how local law enforcement is supposed to cooperate with ICE. Hena.
Jorge Ventura, live in San Antonio, Texas. Thank you for that update. And for more on this, let's bring in retired Yuma Sector Border Chief Chris Clem. Chris, thanks for joining.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me on.
Of course. First, I want to ask, what role, if any, does the Yuma sector play in shaping, supporting programs like 287G that Jorge just mentioned beyond the border?
Well, first of all, every Border Patrol sector is going to work with all their state and local, and including other federal agencies, to conduct their mission. I mean, we had a great relationship when I was chief in Yuma. We had a great relationship with Yuma County and all the surrounding law enforcement. A lot of times the state and some of the political leaders in the state would try to dissuade it, but those sheriffs are the ones that are in charge, and that's who we make those agreements with. Partnership is critical. Every tool in the toolbox to make our communities and our borders and our American cities safe.
With that said, how do you coordinate with state law enforcement in non-border states like South Dakota once they are granted task force authority?
You know, it is about communication, right? That is one of the critical things about leadership, having the right people in place and having a common mission. Look, I want to remind you, the 287G program, it was formed in 1996. Under President Clinton and Attorney General Janet Reno. So it's been around for a while. It just was dissuaded under other administrations in the past. So it is about working together, forming task force, having alliances to really, the bottom line, border security has been national security and public safety. And that's what our sworn law enforcement officers and agents around the country, come to work to do every day. So it's just about coordinating and, providing a common thread and a common mission.
Chris, does this expansion that we're seeing signal a broader shift in immigration strategy from federal level to the state level?
I think it actually shows the cooperation. I've been a proponent of cooperating cities and cooperating states for a long time because we need to protect the communities and all the citizens across the United States. And so I think what you're seeing is that shift of people saying, you know what, we need to get these bad actors off the streets. We need to have consequences for these illegal activities, and we need to stop the threats. So expanding that cooperation and seeing what Florida has done and now what South Dakota is doing and other states. I mean, this has been the blueprint from this administration on day one, and we've seen success, and I think it's going to continue. It absolutely is necessary, and I think it's going to make everybody safer.
Keeping all of that in mind, I do need to cite other issues we're seeing in other states. South Dakota officials say this program will only target violent offenders, drug traffickers. How do we ensure that actually happens?
Well, there's a lot of misinformation out there, and we know that the Secretary of Homeland Security, as well as the borders has told you, or put out there that 70% of everybody that's been arrested under ICE has a criminal history, and there's the remaining 30% have orders of removal or pending charges. So the targets are who they're going after. The difference, too, is this administration is not asking its federal agents and immigration enforcement officers to turn a blind eye to other law enforcement or law violators that they encounter in the course of their daily operations. So I think that's where a lot of that stuff, gets taken out of context. But at the end of the day, if you violate U.S. laws, there's a consequence, and this administration is going to enforce it.
So are you including civil offenses as well, those who have crossed the border illegally but don't have any other criminal history?
Again, it is still 8 U.S.C. 1325. There is a criminal charge. They can choose to prosecute depending on jurisdiction and venue. But you know what? Those aren't the priorities. The priorities are going to be focused on those national security and public safety threats. That's always been the priority of this administration. And it's really always been priority for law enforcement. But at the same time, if they're caught in the wrong place, the wrong time, and they're here illegally, there's a consequence for that.
All right, Chris Clem, thank you so much. I appreciate your analysis tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you. Coming up on America's fastest growing cable channel, President Trump, you see him on your screen, just got back to the White House after his big trip to Scotland. He stopped to speak to reporters. We'll tell you what he said. And remember to download our NewsNation app for the latest news on the top stories of the night. Let's head to Washington now, where President Trump is back on U.S. soil, relaying some good news about the EU trade deal he made while in Scotland. Trump arrived at Joint Base Andrews less than an hour ago on Air Force One, then headed straight to the White House. There, he revealed to reporters some details about the deal he struck while overseas. For more, let's go to NewsNation's Kelly Meyer live from the White House, one of the busiest and hardest working women I know. Hey, Kelly, so what did the president say about the EU deal?
Thank you, Hena. Well, you know, it was a rare moment just moments ago here at the White House when the president crossed over from the residence and was walking back into the West Wing to the Oval Office. And it was as reporters were coming through to return back from the arrival there. So some reporters were able to catch him, and he made this rare stop in the colonnade and took some questions. He talked a bit about the EU deal. He said that was the biggest takeaway, and he said that he's going to be working on these deals in the next few days, and he says it's making the country richer and stronger. It comes as he is continuing to tout that deal that he reached with the EU, and as they are talking about this potential trade truce with China. China saying that the U.S. and China agreed to extend that 90-day truce that they reached in mid-May. We don't know, though, how long this new truce would last, and President Trump says he still needs to approve this. He's going to look it over tomorrow. I wanted to play a bit of what he had to say on Air Force One earlier, and then we'll talk on the other side.
I just had a phone call from Scott Bessent and had a very good meeting with China, and it seems that, I mean, they're going to brief me tomorrow. We'll either approve it or not, but he felt very good about the meeting.
Now the president is returning here to Washington, hoping to ink more deals. I was able to catch up with his top economic advisor, Kevin Hassett, about those deals and what could happen in the days to come. I wanted to play a bit of what he had to tell us earlier today. Take a listen to this.
We expect there may be more deals, but if there aren't, then the August deadline applies. I don't think that's going to be extended, but people can continue to negotiate after that.
So he says countries can continue to negotiate after that August 1st deadline. That's coming up this Friday. So they are hoping to reach some more deals. And then even afterwards, he says the president is always open to negotiations. Hena.
All right, Kelly Meyer live at the White House tonight. Thank you so much, Kelly. And coming up, back to our top story. Chris Cuomo has a lot to say about the deadly New York City shooting. He will join me live with his thoughts. That's next. Chris Cuomo joining me live now. Chris, that deadly shooting at the Manhattan office building, it's a horrible story. You and I were both on air as details were coming in. During your show, we learned the officer who was shot and killed had 2 kids. His wife is 8 months pregnant. I know you've got every angle covered. You're talking to NYPD Chief John Chell, legendary journalist Bob Costas. What do you hope to learn tonight?
Well, I want people to appreciate what this was really about, how difficult a scene this was, how much was necessary at that scene to keep it to what it was, which was horrible enough, and who was lost, and what really matters about why this happened. These days, Hena, everything is competing agendas and different flavors of extremism immediately. This had just happened, and people were already weaponizing it for their own different political agendas, and that's all we see all the time. So I brought in the inimitable Bob Costas, who is so much more than sports. He is such a citizen of the world, and he has lived, and he has seen how things have changed in a way that we need to address immediately.
And as we learn more details, Chris, and you were, again, all these details are coming in, you're relaying it to the viewers. What were you learning? What did you think of this investigation?
Well, the investigation was going to be fairly obvious because the motive is really secondary to the murders, right? No matter what was motivating them, it's not commensurate. So it doesn't matter what was driving this man on one level because what he did about it was completely extreme. But of course, we are now living during a time, and I don't care that he had mental illness. Being mentally ill doesn't mean that you're a monster. It doesn't mean that you can't think anymore. You may be more prone to suggestion, but the suggestion has to be there. And the suggestion that we're hearing echoed again and again all over social media is violence is an acceptable way to advance an agenda. And that's what we saw. And the problem is that the men and women who decide upon themselves to try to stop it are in short supply, and they have everything going against them. And that's what I saw in real time on our city streets.
Well, incredible job last night. Can't wait for your show tonight. Chris Cuomo, take it away.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe below and download our NewsNation app right now on your phone, and you will get fact-based, unbiased news for all Americans.